While most Americans have been distracted by the ongoing election debacle and deep state coup, Communist China has been making major inroads towards the development of a new world order in the Southeast Asia-Pacific region. On November 15, 2020, 15 Asia-Pacific countries signed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP. When ratified, the RCEP is set to be the largest free trade scheme on the planet, with its 15 countries accounting for 2.2 billion people, just over 28% of the world's population, and a total of 26.2 billion in gross domestic product. The agreement was signed by the heads of states of the 15 nations at the 37th Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit in Hanoi, Vietnam. The 15 signatory countries include Australia, Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Myanmar, New Zealand, Philippines, Singapore, South Korea, Thailand, along with the communist Marxist-Leninist governments of Laos, Vietnam, and China. In fact, 7 of those countries, Australia, Brunei, Japan, Malaysia, New Zealand, Singapore, and Vietnam, are also signatories of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, formerly known as just the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. The other CPTPP signatories not in the new RCEP are Canada, Chile, Mexico, and Peru. But these 11 CPTPP countries, together with the United States, originally as one of the principal negotiators under President Obama, would have accounted for 40% of world gross domestic product. The biggest difference between the new RCEP and the TPP, or the now CPTPP, is the inclusion of China, originally excluded from the TPP. I know it's a lot to cover here. So, in fact, during his presidency, Barack Obama attempted to sell the TPP to the American people as a kind of economic free trade alliance intended to curb the rising influence of China in the Asia-Pacific region, with the idea being that if the U.S. didn't spearhead and lead the economic integration with the other Asia-Pacific Rim nations, then China would emerge to dominate the region. In fact, in 2015, President Obama said,
"So the Trans-Pacific Partnership that we're working on, it's the biggest trade deal that we're working on right now, has to do with the Asia-Pacific region. We have to make sure America writes the rules of the global economy. And we should do it today while our economy is in the position of global strength. Because if we don't write the rules for trade around the world, guess what? China will. And they'll write those rules in a way that gives Chinese workers and Chinese businesses the upper hand."
However, despite President Obama's apparent concern for Communist China's rising influence, the truth is that the TPP was always designed to eventually include China and Russia through the establishment of an even larger and all-encompassing economic union known as the Free Trade Area of the Asia-Pacific, FTAAP. The eventual creation of this proposed FTAAP is actually the stated long-term objective of APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, which is a massive intergovernmental forum founded back in 1989 and based out of Singapore, whose 21 member nations not only include the signatory nations of both the RCEP and CPTPP, but also the United States, Chinese Taipei, which is what they call Taiwan, Hong Kong, which has now been assimilated into the Communist Chinese Collective, and Papua New Guinea, and Russia. In addition to APEC, the very preamble of the TPP admits that its goal is to expand and establish the FTAAP. In fact, on page 2 of the TPP, the final point reads, quote, "expand their partnership by encouraging the accession of other states or separate customs territories in order to further enhance regional economic integration and create the foundation of a free trade area of the Asia-Pacific." Furthermore, Chapter 30 of the TPP agreement, entitled Final Provisions, opens the TPP membership to the APEC member states. It reads in Article 30.4 of the TPP, quote, Article 30.4, accession. This agreement is open to accession by any state or separate customs territory that is a member of APEC, so China, Russia, etc. And it's not like President Obama didn't know about the FTAAP. As president, he specifically mentioned and was committed to the FTAAP. In fact, in his first year in office, President Obama, along with the other leaders of APEC, including then communist Chinese dictator Hu Jintao and Russian President Vladimir Putin, jointly declared, quote, we will continue to explore building blocks towards a possible free trade area of the Asia-Pacific, FTAAP, in the future. Midway through his second term, on November 11, 2014, President Obama praised Communist China and Chinese Communist dictator Xi Jinping for their contributions to building the FTAAP. Here's what Obama said. And finally, I want to commend China for focusing this year on what APEC can do to contribute to the realization of the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific. The goal of FTAAP was announced in 2006, and as leaders noted, the many regional initiatives will contribute to the eventual realization. We see our agreement in the Trans-Pacific Partnership as a contribution towards that effort. I look forward to the day when all of our economies can be linked together in a high-standard 21st century agreement. And I think that the work and the efforts of President Xi in setting this agenda here today will help facilitate that. And this didn't stop with Obama or his U.S. Trade Representative Michael Froman. Page 31 of the 2020 Trade Policy Agenda and 2019 Annual Report, authored by U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Robert E. Lighthizer, who is also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, mentions the FTAAP and how the U.S. is continuing to advance it. It reads, quote, Free Trade Area of the Asia-Pacific, FTAAP. The United States continued to advocate for work on topics designed to foster free and fair trade in the region, including addressing issues presented by state-owned enterprises and advancing high-standard labor provisions. Work related to the FTAAP has the potential to improve the ability of all APEC economies to participate in bilateral or other free trade agreements that achieve high standards by removing barriers and unfair practices while embracing more open markets. So is this happening? Is China going to join the CPTPP now? On November 19, just 4 days after the signing of the RCEP agreement in Vietnam, Reuters reported that China is open to the idea of joining the CPTPP. According to their Ministry of Commerce, Reuters reported that, quote, Gao Feng, ministry spokesman, made the comments at a news conference in Beijing. And the Chinese news agency Xinhua also reported on this, saying, China will assume an open and positive attitude towards the idea of joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, the Ministry of Commerce said on Thursday. China welcomes any open, inclusive, and transparent regional free trade agreement that can help foster economic globalization and regional economic integration. It must, however, adhere to the principles of the World Trade Organization, Ministry of Commerce spokesperson Gao Feng told a press briefing. Folks, we were warning the alarm bells about the TPP being used to economically merge the U.S. with Communist China through this FTAAP for years on The New American. You can find all those articles on thenewamerican.com. So undeniably, despite much of the disinformation that has been disseminated by President Obama in both the Wall Street Journal and Fox News at the time when they wanted us to enter the TPP to stop China, it's undeniable that all of that was a lie to trick or beguile us into surrendering our national sovereignty in order to prevent the very thing that the agreement ultimately sought to facilitate: the establishment of a new world order with China and Russia, or as I like to call it, globalism with Chinese characteristics. Obama, Fox, the Wall Street Journal, and the deep state were planning to drag us hook, line, and sinker into their new world order scheme. And folks, this wasn't going to stop with just the FTAAP, because just as Obama was negotiating the TPP in the Asia Pacific, he was also simultaneously negotiating the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, also known as TTIP, with the European Union. So just as Great Britain was working to leave the EU via Brexit, Obama and his trade representative, Michael Froman, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, was working on economically integrating the US with the EU. Folks, you can't make this stuff up. Ultimately, whether or not China joins the CPTPP is immaterial. The bottom line is that the end goal of both the RCEP and the CPTPP is to build the FTAAP, whether by merging the two agreements together or as an outgrowth of one of the two. In fact, last Friday, November 19th, Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga said, quote, "Japan will aspire for the free trade area of the Asia Pacific through the early conclusion of the RCEP agreement and the steady implementation and expansion of the CPTPP as next year's chairs." And if Joe Biden is ultimately sworn in as president, you can bet that he will do everything in his power as president to undo Trump's withdrawal of the TPP by getting us in the CPTPP. So I've explained the problem thoroughly, but what can you and should you be doing to stop this FTAAP from coming true? There's actually a number of things you can do in addition to sharing this video with others to get the word out. First and foremost, all of these agreements, the RCEP, CPTPP, the proposed FTAAP, even the US-EU trade deals, are all negotiated under the auspices or the authority of the World Trade Organization. The WTO is the monolithic authority that governs all of these so-called free trade schemes on behalf of the United Nations for a new world economy and one world government. You need to urgently contact your members of Congress in the House and Senate and demand that they co-sponsor the American Sovereignty Restoration Act to get us out of the United Nations. And you need to demand that they likewise pull us out of the WTO. The UN and the WTO are of paramount importance to the deep state and their plans for one world government. So we have to get out of both of those international organizations. Also, in 2021, Congress is expected to vote on renewing TPA, which is Trade Promotion Authority, the procedural vehicle used by Congress to empower the president to negotiate all of these unconstitutional globalist trade treaties without the advice and consent of the Senate as required by the Constitution. When the time comes to renew TPA in 2021, we urge you to contact your members of Congress to vote no on reauthorizing Trade Promotion Authority. Also, we need to continue getting the word out, educating the electorate about the deep state and their plans for lurching us into a one world government. And like I said earlier, we have tons of articles on thenewamerican.com covering this, so check those out. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to our print magazine as well. And also, consider joining the John Birch Society. We're not going to defeat the deep state by just sitting in front of our computers and televisions, folks. We need to be active and organized. And it's that education plus active organization that's going to ultimately defeat the deep state. Our founder, Robert Welch, would often say, education is our total strategy and truth our only weapon. So we invite you to learn more about our action projects and how to get involved by visiting us at jbs.org to learn more and to get involved in this imperative fight for freedom. Until next week, this has been Christian Gomez. Take care, have a happy Thanksgiving, and God bless.